Hello. I'd like to talk about the proposal made by Judge Nick Mage to ban long pointy kitchen knives like these ones here. Now, before I begin, I would like to say that I did actually make a video on this topic when this was first reported on the news. However, I decided to not publish it because on that video I was pretty angry and I thought to myself, what could the outcome of this be? So I decided to not post it and sort of calm down over it. So here we are again. Now then, on to the point. There's been plenty of people on YouTube talking about this, thankfully. However, a lot of people have missed a few important points. Now I keep saying points, there's no pun intended here, I'm trying to be quite serious. So this judge has argued that no one actually needs a pointed kitchen knife and that filing them down, in his own words, would stop knife crime. He literally said that filing them down is an answer. What he proposes is the government basically make it illegal for the shops, I assume, to ban the sale of pointed kitchen knives. So I assume they be either rounded off at the tip or they completely cut off, and that people take their own personal kitchen knives to a place to be modified so they no longer have a point. So this judge actually expects millions, absolutely everyone in the country except chefs and people like that, to take their knives. Now this is going to be hundreds of millions of knives. You have to remember that. This is hundreds of millions of kitchen knives. But he expects them to take them to some place to be modified and ground down. There's one small problem with that people actually haven't spoken about. Yeah. Are you going to ban files as well? The thing is, if you file the point off of the knife, you could also file the point back onto the knife. I mean, there's plenty of custom knife makers who turn any old piece of steel into a knife. I mean, you can make a knife out of almost any piece of metal. I mean, people make knives out of bike brakes, for God's sake. A knife, at the end of the day, is just a piece of metal. That's all it is. A piece of metal with a shape, and it's been sharpened. That's it. So by bringing this, making this into law, you would also, to make this effective, you would also have to ban files, bench grinders, angle grinders, Dremels and rotary multi-tools, sanders, saws, and a whole host of other tools. Not forgetting sharpening stones like Japanese water stones or oil stones, which are used to sharpen them, because you could use them to put a point back on a knife. Now, you'd be there for a very long time, but you could use them to put a point on a knife. And how you're going to force these millions of people to have hundreds of millions modified, I will never know. And the funny thing is, he's not proposing how that's going to work. He's just dreamt up this idea, probably pulled the idea right out of his arse and thought, let's do this. This will work. Not taking into consideration that's literally hundreds of millions of knives. I mean, go in your kitchen drawer right now as you're watching this video. Open up the drawer. How many knives do you have there? Well, I've got at least 5 kitchen knives anyway. 5 or 6. Honestly, I just use my bushcraft knives to cook dinner. I just use a Mora bushcraft knife. So, I don't have that many kitchen knives. But most people, let's just say most people have about 5 kitchen knives minimum. That's obviously not including butter knives. But kitchen knives like these. Okay, so we're looking at hundreds of millions of knives now, aren't we? If, say, each household has 5 kitchen knives. Now that's just on the low end. Now, the only positive outcome of this is he actually acknowledged that knife laws aren't working. He acknowledged that 90% of knife crime is with kitchen knives, which is why he's proposed this. What makes him think this is going to work though? If all our other countless knife laws, that's been brought in the past 30 or so years has done absolutely nothing to stop knife crime, why is this one thing going to do it? And there's so many other things you could stab people with. In fact, another way you could use to put a point on a knife is you could even get something like this, assuming it's not got a point in it, you can even just put it in a vise and snap it. I mean, kitchen knives like this, bought out of a supermarket, they're not made of good steel whatsoever. Put it in a vise or even between two rocks and just snap it. Once again, as I've always mentioned, you could use a screwdriver to stab someone. You could use certain kinds of saws. You could use a piece of glass. There's countless things that you could use to stab someone. Now, like I said, he acknowledged that 90% is knife crime. Knife crime is being used with 90% of knife crime is kitchen knives. And that the other 10% is cheap Rambo style knives and samurai swords. Which is interesting that he's not wanting to ban those, which is strange. But of course, he eventually will. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is the same guy that about 5 or so years ago, he wanted long kitchen knives banned completely. Which I'm not sure which one's more stupid, banning them outright or having them filed down. I know which one's going to be more expensive. I mean, where's the government suddenly going to find the money to fund this program, to have all these knives filed down? And are you going to force people to do it? Is it going to be mandatory? What happens if they don't? If they don't, are you going to come knocking on the door, confiscate all their knives, charge them with being in possession of an offensive weapon? Also, at what point is the knife considered to be filed down? I'll give an example of what I'm trying to say here. This knife here, your bread knife, well, it's not really pointy. I personally wouldn't really consider that pointy. I mean, I can't really feel that. That's not even designed to be a point. I mean, this is rounded over. You can see it's rounded over here. Okay, but if I was to thrust this into someone, it's still going to penetrate the skin. You could still do a lot of damage with this. Or what about if you were to swing it like a machete? You're still going to give them some very bad cuts. Now, I believe another thing he suggested was not only should they not be pointy, they should also not be sharp. So essentially all of our kitchen knives are as blunt as a butter knife. What's the bloody point in that? Then how are you meant to cut anything? The point of a knife is it's supposed to be sharp, it's supposed to cut, it's supposed to slice, and in some cases it's supposed to chop, it's not supposed to tear, it's not supposed to crush. Butter knives are not meant for cutting whatsoever. Butter knives are made for one thing, spreading butter or jam or whatever. It's not meant for cutting. Could you imagine having to cut your steak or your sausage all the time with a butter knife? Well, that's what this idiot wants. So, he's going to expect absolutely everyone to have these knives modified. Well, okay, let's just assume that this law comes into force. I am required to take this common kitchen tool to be modified. No doubt at my own expense. That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, this is the British government we're talking about here, British judges, so that's what they expect. So I've got to get this knife modified, which is not meant for stabbing, it's just a kitchen knife. But I could still have this. I won't need to get this modified. Does that not just seem very stupid? Now this is no more dangerous than this. It looks scary, but it's not. Look, the kitchen knife has a slightly longer blade anyway. Although this is better steel and slightly thicker, they're going to do the same damage. I'd argue that this should actually be worse. But to wrap this up, the final point I'd like to make is, if this was to also include knives like this, well, where does that leave collectors like me? Because collectors have spent a lot of money on knives like these, and some of these knives are an investment. Some of them are for some people, sentimental because they're so old. Are you just going to have to chop the tip off and just completely devalue it, ruin the look? And I mean, these knives cost about 90 quid. In fact, one point I forgot to mention is some people spent a lot of money on their kitchen knives. Like Victorinox or Cold Steel or Bocker, some of those knives can cost hundreds of pounds each. I mean, this is just a cheap, nasty set out of Asda. I got the 5 knives for about 12 quid. Sure, no big deal, right? But what about those people who've spent hundreds of pounds on a quality set of kitchen knives? Are you going to force them to have them modified? What about the guy that spent hundreds, maybe even thousands, on a set of quality forged Japanese kitchen knives? Those things are a work of art. Hundreds of pounds possibly per knife. And you're just expected to cut a piece off of it. Anyway, I've noticed that there seems to be more crime with hammers, so I think I might do a video on that just shortly, but I'm not sure yet. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.